Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome back to the Deck Tech. It's been a while, but yes, back in with this thing. So I've got a few decks I actually want to make videos on, but we're going to start with the one that I've been playing most recently at top of ladder. Actually made it to about 100-point gap between first and second for a while. This is Mono Dominion, a deck that I have a very versed history with. But yes, this is a new version of this deck. There's a few key tweaks. We'll go card by card, and at the end, we'll look at some cards that maybe you could include. I've tested some, haven't tested others. Not a perfect list, but I encourage experimentation. Now, we're actually going to start with the most important card in the deck, which is Amethyst Scarab. Now, Scarab has been the core piece of every Mono Dominion deck, I think, across the entire game's history. Since before Scarab was about, they relied on Power Surge, and that wasn't enough ramp, so you got Power Surge and usually New Horizons to get that double ramp. But Scarab being primary has allowed this. Now, the reason this build came about is because Scarab in its current state is now 2 mana, and if you play it with another one in play, you get a ramp. This has led to 15 Scarabs. So essentially, the way this operates is that you keep hands with 2 Scarabs or more, and you don't keep hands with less than 2 Scarabs. That's basically how that works. And you get them down as fast as you can, get your ramp going, and then they're also a built-in win condition because they beat down with their plus ability. Very simple card, very powerful card, and the real reason this deck works. Now, besides that, Yitix, very uncommon hero. Only really used in, well, has been used periodically in Shaman decks, but only really used in Mono Dominion builds for the past couple of months. Now, the reason we do this is because Yitix, you start with 2 extra life, and, well, you play a non-ancient spell, you lose 2 life, so it balances out if you play a single spell. However, there are no non-ancient spells in this list, so you get a 2 health boost, and more importantly, you get a card by paying 1 mana for skill shrines, which is actually a big deal sometimes, although not always that feasible. But you also get a 3rd hero power slot. This is why Yitix is good in Dominion, because Dominion has 3 core hero powers. They're all very powerful, and usually Dominion decks have to pick between 2. So we'll start with the least common and probably weakest of the 3, which is Stronghold Metropolis, which is your draw engine. You get to sacrifice level 1 creatures to draw a card for 1 mana. Very efficient. Every other turn, you get to draw cards. Now, I said it's the weakest one because often you actually want to just keep pressuring instead of giving up pressure for card advantage, but it is there. And there are ways in this deck of generating infinite level 1 creatures, like Cloning Vat, where every turn, spend 2 mana, get a level 1 slave, and then sacrifice it for a card. The other 2 are the core removal shrines. We've got Cathedral of Night, which is your life gain. Vampiric Touch, very powerful ability. 3 mana, weakness emblem, gain 2 life. Surprising amount of things have 1 health or 1 attack, and this very much negates them. It also turns 2/3s into 1/2s, which are significantly weaker. The last shrine is arguably the strongest, Assassin's Guild. You get Rune of Blades, 2 mana. Next time you play a level 1 creature, it deals damage equal to its attack to an enemy creature. This also applies on hit effects. Very, very important because it means it works with Assassin. And Assassin has Deadly. Assassin, sometimes you'll play it out for the body, the 1/2/3 speed, good for 2 mana. But primarily, Assassin is in this deck as a 4 of, essentially, 4 mana, summon a 1/2/3 speed with Deadly, and kill something. That's essentially why it's in the deck. It's very good at that, and it really helps stabilize aggro decks. Well, against aggro decks. The other option for Assassin's Guild is usually Powerlust Incarnate for those really big hits late game, but it can be used with Scarab and Printha, which means, if you've been noticing, aside from Devourer, it works with every creature in the deck. And that's a lot of level 1 creatures. So that's the shrines. Now, there's only 16 shrines in this deck, which a lot of people like playing 17. I'm actually one of those people that likes playing 17. However, in this deck, you actually go up a lot of mana instead of a lot of levels, so you end up drawing more cards so you see more shrines. Essentially, that's why you don't need the 17. I've never had any issues, and I've played well over 35 games with this deck now, consecutively. Haven't had... I don't think I've had shrine issues once, actually. Maybe one game. So, very consistent shrine base. Now, on to the rest of the cards. We covered Shadowstep Assassin, we've covered Scarab, so we'll do the other two creatures next. Prinha is a quite powerful card, although not at full capacity in this kind of deck. So, 3 mana, 1 level, 2/3/2 speed. When you play Prinha, you can choose to put her under something, and then at the start of your next turn, Prinha essentially kills the thing, and then summons herself. The key is it can only be if her speed is equal or higher. Now, with her scaling ability, if you have 3 levels in this deck, she goes to a 3/4/4 speed, which is a significant stat line. However, this deck actually likes going up a lot of mana and not levels, which means that secondary effect on Prinha doesn't happen as early as you'd like. So that's why she's not a big focus of the deck, but she is still good. She offers a quite simple solution to implant-based things, to Harpy, even just to aggro starts. If they go 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, you play Prinha, you're probably going to kill 2 or 3 creatures with this Prinha. So she's a good stop to aggro, and is generally another versatile method of removal that's not a spell. The last creature, well, aside from Devourer, but that's a special one. The last creature, aside from that aforementioned wipe engine, is Paralust Incarnate. Now, Incarnate is a very simple card. 2 mana, 1 level, stats are equal to half of your mana crystals rounded up, and speed is equal to your Dominion level. Generally, this is a big beat stick. It also works well with your Shrine to kill stuff, because you get up to 3/3 easily, 4/4, 5/5, even 6/6 towards the end of the game. It hits very hard to deal with. Just a big brute force effect. Can also get to 3 speed later, but usually is not required to close out a game with 3 speed. Usually just use it to beat them. Now, the aforementioned board wiper is Devourer of Worlds. Devourer of Worlds is an interesting card that periodically comes in and out of the metagame. 5 mana, 3 levels, one of the most expensive creatures in the game. 6/6, 2 speed, one of the largest creatures in the game. Embody, meaning you can sacrifice a spirit to give it swift and make it cost 4. And, this is important, you get access to its effect. If it embodies a creature, you can essentially suck up all the creatures and artifacts with the same mana cost as the thing you sacrificed under Devourer. It gets -1/-1 for each card under it, but it's like a board wipe. So, there are 2 costs of spirits in this deck. It would have been nice to get a 3 cost, but those are harder to get in Dominion. The 1 mana costs come from Cloning Vat. One of the 3 slaves you can get from Cloning Vat is an Enchained Soul, and that costs 1. So, it's a 1 mana spirit. So you can put spirit down, play Devour, suck up all those zombies, all those artifacts, all the random 1-cost things. It's also part of the reason Chalice isn't in this deck anymore, because Devourer would kill your own Chalices. Not what you want to be happening. The alternative is using it on something like Scarab, or Incarnate if you really have to, to suck up all the 2 costs. Now, this is very uncommon. I've only done it twice, I think, because it kills your own Cloning Vats, and it also kills all of your creatures, because they all cost 2. However, it is an option, so keep that in mind. It is an option. It can be used to deal with some nasty boards, usually out of a bear's deck. Now we get on to the spells and artifacts. Cloning Vat, mentioned it a few times. It's your endgame value engine, it's your tombs, it's your versatility option. You get 2/3 Tortured Orcs out of it, and Chain Souls for Devour, which can also lead to a life win condition on some situations. And importantly, you get access to the Miner. Now, the Miner can put Might Emblems on things, and this turns Cloning Vat into a combat trick. Because you can use it on your turn, even in your combat step, and also you can leave them in play. And it makes combat very hard for your opponent once you have Cloning Vats going. Very powerful card. There's 4 in the deck because late game you have the mana to use them, although generally you don't need them early game. You can get them early game, but you don't need them early game, apart from in some matchups. Cloning that can be really nice early against corruption decks, like control corruption decks, because you can get those tortured orcs down. However, generally, early, you want to be playing scarabs, so cloning that doesn't tend to come down until turn 4 or 5 usually. Last 3 cards in the deck, aside from Valley, but Valley should be in every deck. Last 3 cards in the deck are your removal suite. Helm is one of the single strongest removal cards in the game, frankly. 4 mana, 2 levels, you get to steal something, and it will eventually die since it puts weakness emblems on it every turn. However, this lets you deal with a lot of stuff, and also, Artifact Destruction is good against this if your opponent is ahead and you're using it to catch up. However, if they don't have the Artifact Destruction, you probably just close the gap. But what often happens is you're ahead in the mid game because of your Scarab starts that they couldn't deal with, and then you play Helm, and it doesn't matter if they have Artifact Destruction, because they're so far behind on tempo, they will lose. And that's part of the reason that this is maybe one of the best Helm decks I've ever played, to be honest. Because sometimes even Artifact Destruction doesn't get them out of it, and that's a big deal. We've also got Cleanse, which in this deck essentially costs 5. So it's essentially a 5 cost, 1 level, remove anything. It removes any card and puts it on the bottom of their deck, which gets around dice, triggers, and it gets around pretty much everything. So it is the catch-all removal spell, also instant. Cleanse took a hit to its card advantage, where it no longer draws a card if you use its play boost for the removal. However, you can actually use this to mess up Reanimator by cleansing their setup in the graveyard and drawing a card off it. Generally, though, this is your catch-all removal, and just like Helm, if you're ahead and you cleanse something, you probably win. And this deck generates a lot of mana, not just because of ramp, but because generally your 5 levels, not 5 levels, your 5 mana 1 level before anything else. And when other people are at 2 levels or 3 levels, you're not, so you've got more mana to play with, so cleanse is actually cost efficient. Very powerful card. I think Mono Dominion is, well, it always has been the best cleanse deck, but now so even more. And the last card in the deck is Primal Battle. Primal Battle, 2 levels, 1 mana, ancient spell, very important, lets you essentially fight 2 creatures. Generally, your creatures are either bigger than theirs or have deadly, so Primal Battle is a very it's almost a catch-all removal spell in a lot of situations. Now, it's not as strong as you'd expect in this deck, because often you want to be doing other things, but it is useful, and it's also ancient, which helps with the shrine situation, because you can use ancient cards as shrine substitutes, essentially. So, it boosts the consistency. Now, I said I would mention a few other cards that I've kind of looked at and tested a bit. The numbers as well, up to interpretation. I have been playing 3 Devourer before, I've been playing 14 Scarabs, or I've gone up to 16 actually in some cases to kind of test things. Prinha, I've been playing 2 Prinha sometimes. This is entirely up to you on these numbers. In terms of extra cards to look at, if we just go through Dominion a bit, there is options for things like Mind Extortion. Keep in mind you actually lose, health to play your Mind Extortion, but turn 1 Mind Extortion could be deadly. It could be absolutely deadly when they have to deal with a Scarab on turn 2. So this is a card that I actually really want to test moving forward, and I would suggest you maybe look at it as well. In terms of other options, Power Surge is common for some people with this deck. I actually don't like it. I think you should just be playing more Scarabs. Soul Flames, I would say it costs too much life, but another removal option. A lot of the other creatures, same issues where it's just taking space away from your other 2-drops, so I wouldn't recommend it. Chalice, I talked about, it gets devoured a lot. You can play Chalice, just maybe not with Devourer. Like, you can cut Devourer for Chalice for some better game against, like, control decks and Stoli type decks, but I would not recommend playing it with Devourer. It's kind of an either-or situation there. And yes, Cataclysm. This is the last card I want to talk about. Now, Cataclysm, in its current form, I don't think is good with Yitix. I think Yitix usually goes card for card on board. It's very hard to swarm this type of deck, and Cataclysm sounds good with things like Incarnate, but in practice it doesn't actually do what you want it to a lot of time. And remember, you are losing life to cast this thing, and you're going to lose consistency, and that's a big deal when you're playing a Scarab deck. You want consistency at all costs. The idea is you're not countering your opponent, you're putting forward a game plan that's more powerful than theirs, and I think Cataclysm plays against that playstyle somewhat, and that's the reason I'm not playing it. Although previous versions of Mono Dominion have played Cataclysm in every single one, and maybe future ones will as well. So if that's the style you want to look at Cataclysm, but I personally don't like it right now. Now, in terms of matchups, I would say in its current state, this deck is actually favored in most matchups. The only struggle it's had has been against mass artifact destruction and against some spell-heavy decks. And that's about it. The deck is very strong right now. Went on a massive win streak with it, and I would encourage people to test and try this out, because I think it's a deck that's kind of snooped under the radar for a while since it wasn't that popular, but here I am advocating for it, and I think it's actually a very, very good deck. But anyway, that's this particular deck taken care of. Well, that's me. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any questions, either put it in the comment section, or alternatively, I will put the link down to the Spellweaver Discord down below. By all means, hop on, ask me a question. I'm usually logged on, so you can usually just get at me there. If you've got any feedback, by all means, let me know. I've been out of this video making thing for a while. But anyway, as for now, first time in a long time, this is Jotto, signing off.